we left, I think Commissioner Wallstein had asked for the total education budget number and then the specific amount that the county gave.
Sure. Yeah, it's 233 was our number, and
Okay, there we go. So their total budget with the additional 10.8 on top of our county number is 460.2. And then their total budget with our current county funding is 446.1 million.
Does that include the debt service?
No,
No,
not
okay.
including debt
Just making
service.
sure.
Sorry.
And I'm sorry, I apologize, the 460.2 is with the 10.8. The 446.1 is without the 10.8. And that's the total education budget? And what do we give them? I mean, what is the county's contribution to that?
So currently, it's 233.1 million.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I gotta ask this stupid question. Why is the difference 14 million?
That service?
I asked debt service,
Yeah,
and
I
they said
think you,
no.
I think you, yeah, but I think you heard the first number maybe. That's what I thought that's what I thought the difference was.
So there's, I mean, if I got the numbers right, it's 446 and 460.
Their number also includes in-kind, which is not part of that 233.1 million, so have to take that out of the calculation. But the 460.2 does include in-kind and those other small pieces.
yeah, and when you hear Board of Education budget numbers, it can get confusing because they adopt it with in-kind, but that's not really part of their budget. And then also sometimes they give the number including restricted funding from the state and sometimes without restricted funding from the state. So both accurate and useful numbers, but you have to kind of keep track of which one you're talking about.
But neither number includes the debt service that we pay on their behalf. Okay, just making sure.
Do we have that number? Do we have that number?
The debt service,
Yes.
it's about
That's-
14 million, right? It's in the budget.
Oh, okay, all right.
14 million. That's why I thought, well, maybe.
Even though the state requires them to adopt that, it has nothing to do with their budget at all.
That's just something on our end.
Yes.
I've got something I wanted to bring up, but I don't want to, it's somewhat related to budget, but I don't want to hijack things too much, but I will. I've broached this with the budget staff before, and I want to make sure I understand exactly what the situation is. At the end of I understand like burn rates are difficult to predict and things like that, but departments are given a budget. So for whatever reason, if those funds aren't used by the end of the fiscal year, explain to me what happens to them, because I'm going to be advocating that they don't get to keep that money if the answer is different. So I just need to understand what happens to those, whether it's they didn't hire somebody, there was a vacancy, what happens to that money?
Okay, are you talking about agencies that report to you, or, okay. They don't get to keep the money, and that becomes part of that unassigned fund balance, or the surplus at the end of the year. So if budget is $300,000 and we spend $275,000, that $25,000 becomes part of your surplus from that year. And then that either sits in unassigned fund balance, or the commissioners make some decision to use it in another budget.
So what date does it hit that unassigned fund balance? The last day of June, or, I mean, what's the timing on that?
Yeah, the funding lapses at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
So, and this is an important distinction. In capital budgets, the funding stays in place. It doesn't matter what fiscal year you're in. But in the operating budget, when the year's over, it's over. Any money sitting there now is off the books as far as the operating budget goes.
And something that something Commissioner Rothstein will probably be familiar with is in the federal government, there's a system that I hate. It's everybody at the end of the fiscal year just hurries up to spend their money. Because if you don't spend it, you get it taken away.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that, that I understand what happens to that money, but I guess I want to also make sure that that practice it's not being practiced here at the county.
It's not. And I think we have a longstanding culture that we've actively encouraged. We want people to feel comfortable that just because you didn't spend it means you're going to lose it. And every year, we reevaluate the budget. Now, you say a position didn't get filled. Unless that position's going away, they're going to spend it. They will need to spend it the next year. So that will show up again in the next budget. Sometimes, we see we've been budgeting $20,000 a year for some purpose, and only $5,000 a year is getting spent. At some point, we will say, that's not necessary, and we will change that budget. But we're always reacting to what the actual need is, not whether did you spend it in time.
I think the big difference, because I agree, but the big difference is in DOD or wherever, we don't worry about revenue. We worry about expenses. Whereas here, we're worried about our taxpayers, our community's revenue, along with expenses. That's the difference. I mean, I was given X amount of dollars, and you're right, spend it by 1 October, or else next year, I don't get that much money, so I'm outspending everything, every dime I could. But I wasn't ever worried about revenue. That's the big
Now, are
difference.
any of the enterprise funds different? Obviously, if they lose money, the general fund picks up the difference, for instance, the landfill. But do they carry money over, or they're just like everybody else?
Each of them has their own fund balance.
So the enterprise has their own fund balance?
Yes. So, if you think about the general fund is one box, the water and sewer enterprise fund is another box. Now, sometimes money moves between those boxes, but they are independent of each other.
And if, and back to Commissioner Guerin's question, let's say, whatever, I'm Director of Public Works, and I need a bridge guy, but it's not in my budget. Even if I have money in my budget, I still have to get permission to change the line in the budget.
Yes.
Okay.
The amount of money we spent on the roads, whether, I don't know if it was 1 year or 2 years, paving those roads, the 57 miles, or, was that a one-time deal, or was that was?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
it was budgeted one
Okay.
time and
Okay.
spent over several years,
Okay,
but the budgeting part is not repeated.
yeah. Okay.
Now, I know this is I know this is maybe a little off topic, but I'm looking at some of the numbers up here, and I know that in the past, we knew what the next 5 years are projected to bring. How does FY '30 jump up so dramatically from FY '19? It's by somewhere around $10 million.
FY '29, you mean?
Yeah, I apologize, from FY '29, I apologize.
It's fine.
Okay, well, there's not going to be an easy answer to that, but some of the pieces are, what are the revenue projections in '29 and '30? Like, for example, property tax, your largest revenue, from year to year, we're not assuming the same assessment growth, so that can change. What assumptions are we building in for income tax and for other revenues? But then even on the expenditure side, is there something different happening in one year than another? And one that can change it pretty quickly is debt service. When does debt service for a project, when do we actually expect it to be sold and hit the bottom line? Now, I don't know what pieces are affecting that, but somewhere in what I just said would be the answer to that question.
And does that also hold true for FY '26? Because that just kind of strikes me as odd, is that for 1 year, the number goes down before it comes back up. Same kind of thing?
Yes, and right, it can seem counterintuitive just looking at the bottom line. But again, you have a number of things happening in different years, sometimes pulling you in different directions. And I think one of the big things there probably would be property tax, because we're assuming the next one is going to be not a 24% increase, we built in a 15% increase, but then I think that's followed by 5% increase.
There is something else that's happening here, Ted. In FY '30, there is an AgPres debt service. It's a principal payment that is becoming mature in FY '30, and that's increasing the debt service line by $4.5 million, but there's also an offsetting revenue. So that explains $4.5 million of that $10 million or $9.5 million increase.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, and what we call the bottom line, where you have transfers and use of one-time money, that can change this a lot too. And my mind didn't go there. But, what Deb's talking about is, we have IPAs reach the end, and then there's some things that have to happen to close those out. But also, a transfer, if you have a transfer to capital 1 year of $2 million and a transfer to capital the next year of $10 million, that hits your bottom line.
Okay, and I'm sorry, can you walk me through that again with the AgPres debt service? What is that? Where did that come from? And is that something, I know you said there's offsetting revenue for it, or there's not?
Deb's still thinking.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, because that's the bottom line. I'm wondering if the revenue's supposed to be in here. Current year surplus, we're showing, I think we need to look at this. Current year surplus is showing 2 million, but the debt service is higher than that.
Well, we can take a look at that and make sure we're in a position to explain. We can bring that back to you another time.
Okay, and I'm asking because I know everything, what we're doing today doesn't just affect this year's budget, but, going over the next couple of years affects those budgets as well. And it just struck me as interesting that, all of a sudden there's a 10 plus or a $10 million increase over 1 year, so.
And I think, the easy way to think about this is revenues don't always grow, aren't always projected to grow in a perfectly consistent way. You have some expenditures that are pretty predictable, and other are, I shouldn't say predictable, grow in a consistent way, and others that don't. And below the line things can make things bounce around all over the place.
Within the health department, do we have any discretion on the amount that we're providing them?
Yes, there is a amount you're required to fund by the state, but we do exceed that. And whose health department? I know we looked recently. Do you remember how much we're funding in excess of what we're required to?
I don't remember, but I can get it real quick and let you know.
Okay, because we are funding them $4.1 million. So it'd be interesting to see how much above and beyond. Yeah, so,
Ed, what page are you on? I'm sorry.
24.
Thank you.
Keep in mind, though, while we have discretion to reduce that funding, it's not like it's a freebie.
Sure.
There would be services would have to be reduced.
Right. Just, yeah, I mean, whatever we're providing them above and beyond, what is that money going towards regarding services and what, make a decision on the risk associated with not doing those services.
I think we're largely talking about environmental health. And another complicating factor, even if we're not required to provide that much funding, in some cases, there are things we're required to do by state law.
Right.
And if you don't fund, then you'd be left to say, well, how does that happen? Yeah, I hadn't never thought about it this way, but kind of like Blueprint. The state isn't telling us we need to fund all the Blueprint activities, but they're saying they have to be funded.
Right. A few years ago, we took money out of economic development, didn't we?
There've been a number of changes over years.
Yeah,
It's currently at 800,000?
850, I think. Yeah, so was that reinstated? I don't know if that's the right word. Was that put back after so many years, or was it double that and we cut it in
That's-
half?
That is the planned funding right now for all years.
Yeah. I can't remember what caused us to take it out, but that was a place we were able to find.
Place where you had discretion and you were looking for money. And it is another one of those places where you have total discretion.
Right.
There's nobody that requires you to do anything there.
Would it be possible that the removal of that money at that time had something to do with the pandemic?
No.
No,
Yeah,
no.
Were there were funds, and again, please do correct me if I'm wrong, weren't there there's some kind of funding that was received in order to get information or something out to businesses? I remember, like, services or
Business grants.
some grants, okay, thank you.
Well, that's what we used money for, was to provide small business
Okay.
grants.
In the beginning stages of the pandemic,
Right.
the county used about 800,000, and a little bit more, of county funding to grant to small businesses in the county to help them bridge the original gaps caused by, are people there coming or what? Everybody's looking at the doors. To bridge the gaps caused by.
Ghosts.
Commissioner Rothstein first, so we'll find out.
We're good, right? Okay. As long as it just eats Commissioner Rothstein and doesn't go any farther. The monster that's coming in the room. Anyway, yeah, so the county put out about 800,000, a little more, of county
Right.
money to help support the local small businesses in those first few weeks of the pandemic. And then, in May of 2020, when the CRF money first came in, the county commissioners at the time, then one of the
one of the uses of a portion of that money, I forget how much, was to give grants of that money to small businesses.
But that was a different, but that
That was federal
800,000,
money.
okay,
The
okay.
first
Was county.
tranche, as they say, of money was county money, the 800,000, and then the second
Right.
portion and beyond was FRF, or CRF money at the time.
That money was identified and used, so it has no implications for anything you're looking at today.
The Farm Museum, I mean, because the economic development in the Farm Museum is about $1.9 million. The Farm Museum, is it people as well as operations, or that's a lot of money? Because how many folks are over at the Farm Museum?
I don't know, we can find out pretty quickly,
Yeah.
probably more than you think.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I'm just kind of throwing things on the table, saying, hey, this is a lot of money.
Do Wine Fest operating costs fall under that item, or do they go somewhere else for the Wine Fest every year?
Yeah,
But
it
we-
falls under Farm Museum,
Okay.
the expenses. And there's 11 employees, 11.17. Yeah, that's current in FY '24.
Okay.
Yeah, and the wine festival, you bring that up, an important point here. It is an expenditure in the Farm Museum budget. It also does generate general fund revenue, but we spend more than we make.
What is the difference? Do you have the numbers?
No,
If-
we can get it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Also, to your point on the Farm Museum, the grounds expenses for grass cutting and so forth, that's included in that number. So that's actually our money. We're not outsourcing that. So all the maintenance and everything else, that's part of that 1.049, I guess it is.
So,
That's the revenue, not the
so,
expenses.
right, the revenue. The revenue for the Farm Museum, including the Wine Festival, is on page 16. So for the actuals for '23, FY '23 were $162,000 and change.
The 162 is the revenue that was generated, or is expected to be
That was the
generated?
actual revenues
The
in
actual.
that first column. That was FY '23 actual revenues, because that's already audited.
So, staying on that page 17, the rents and royalties revenue goes from 6.4 million down to 600,000.
Rents and royalties.
What,
Page
Oh,
you
that's
want?
in kind.
Down the
Story.
bottom.
That's a recognition of in-kind with the,
Ed, what?
I apologize, I'm on page 17. General fund operating revenues,
The 6.4 million.
on the towards the bottom, about 6 rows from the bottom, 6, 7 rows.
Rents and royalties, okay, got it.
Yeah, right, that's what Deb was saying. That's more an accounting thing than a budgeting thing. So at the end of the year, they attribute in-kind costs. Remember, this is another one, no money changed hands to the actuals, but it wasn't money that was actually spent or received.
Now, a quick question, since we're on that topic. Is that, and I guess I'll ask Deb, because Deb was kind of doing some research the other week. Does that number include that list of properties you had given to all of us under the rents and royalties?
the 670,000 does,
Okay.
yes.
Because that is an area, and I don't want to take an extensive amount of time today. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at that yet, but that 3-page spreadsheet, I do think we need to take a little time in the near future and maybe have some conversations about some of that.
This one, Tom?
Yes, that one. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to take the time to go into in-depth right now, but as we look through it, you'll see that there's broken out by monthly, some are annual, and then, a significant amount of these are in kind. And the one question I have, and I realize that, this is a wide array of groups and individuals that are utilizing county property, but these, this is just as much taxpayer money as whether we're writing a check to the Board of Education or any other group. So I think we kind of need to take a nosedive into this and kind of take a harder look into how we're renting out some of these properties, given the circumstances.
And this will be overly simple, but there's kind of two different things happening here. One is, going back to earlier conversation, where we're allowing an organization to make use of our property. And often, again, I would say that was done instead of giving them money. And the other is where we have a piece of property, but we're renting it out. This would typically be if somebody's farming a piece of our property, or we have a house that somebody is renting.
The Piney Run Dam, there's no operational money put aside to that, is there? That's all capital.
The money you're looking at is capital.
Yeah.
Not sure exactly where it is, but I'm sure we spend some operating money on the,
Yeah.
we have to do some maintenance.
Right.
That's not associated with the capital project.
I think they have to do an inspection, I believe it's every 5 years.
Just let me know, so I won't be walking on the dam.
You're not supposed to walk on the
I
dam.
don't walk on the dam. I'm not allowed to.
It's not a trail.
It's not a trail. I get yelled at by my administrator not to walk on the dam.
You do.
I do, but I don't. Walk on the dam, that is. Small business, how much money are we putting into SBDC right now? And has that increased over time? There it is.
75,000.
Did that say eliminate funding?
It's just, all that is a list of different possibilities and different things that we have put together, but that's where I was going to find the number quickly.
Okay, so we put in SBDC, and that's for the SBA individual that supports Hartford, Cecil, and us, correct? And the individual downstairs. Is that? I believe so, yeah, okay. What's that? Where's the community college?
What, the college?
Because one of the conversations that Dr. Ball was having when he presented last week was the value that his individual provides within the Miller Center in partnership with SBDC and the revenue. Now, the challenge is that they don't share that information. It's more of a pull than a push. And it gets to a point where it's at the end of the year, we hear this information, and it's hard to make a good decision.
When you say value, are you talking about just kind of value to the community, or are you talking about when he was talking about those return on investment numbers?
Both. Honestly, both.
Okay, well, value to the community, you all can judge.
Right.
The return on investment numbers, I don't think are relevant to us, even assuming that they're accurate from some study. They take into account things that do not generate revenue for your budget.
Right.
You know, so, and not just the college, but other people try and make the case, every dollar you spend here generates $2 or $10
Right.
or whatever. And you know it doesn't work this way, because all we would have to do is funnel millions of dollars to one of those agencies, and all the money it would create would solve our problems, and we know it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
No, it's a valid point. I do think, though, when you're looking at, say, SBDC, I'm not going to say in comparison, but when you're looking at them, I do know they get some matched money. So if we put up X amount of money and we're getting a state or whatever match money, it's not free money. Somebody's paying for it. It's somebody else's tax money, but we're not putting that money out. To my understanding, when we had kind of reached out to the community college, some of the questions I had asked in reference to, while they were able to give us some data, they're not under the same sort of requirements that SBDC is under. So that kind of gives me a little pause, not saying anything against them. It's just a case of SBDC has to report that federally. So there has to be a lot more stricter criteria, whereas, Miller and the community college do a great job. It just doesn't have that same level of information and oversight. I know some of the questions I had asked, there wasn't a lot of specifics and some of the detail as to, to Ted's point, what kind of revenue. And yes, you may interact with, 100 clients a year, but what does that turn into? Is that 100 small businesses at 10,000 a year? Or is that, several large companies that come out of that? There's a lot of ways to define what a business or a company is. So I kind of, it's one of the things I've been kind of looking at in reference to both these two organizations and how they're approaching things.
And just a reminder, at the board's direction, we have already removed funding for the Miller Center. And also at your direction, a little bit of that money went to SBDC to increase their budget.
Did they ask for it?
No,
How much went to them?
$17,000.
That's a very interesting and specific amount, 17,000, not like around 20 or 30 or around 50.
I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it got them to $75,000. That might have been why.
Okay.
I believe that's correct.
We had the conversation the other day about sewer, water and sewer fees. There are other fees that are out there. Are there any thoughts about changing fee structures for some of the other fees that can generate, anything you change will generate revenue, but is there value in changing it?
There's nothing actively happening. If you want, we can explore whatever you want. I think there are things in different sorts of groups, like water and sewer fees are clearly a user fee, and that is directly tied to the cost of operating the system. You have things like park entrance fees. You can set them anywhere you want, but a consideration is always, do you set it to a point where people say, forget it, I'm not going to do
Right.
that? You have things like inspection fees, which are tied to a specific activity, but we can't set them so high that it basically generates profit for us. We can only cover the cost of providing that service. But there's probably opportunity in almost any fee we have to do something more than we are doing, if you want to look at that.
Because fees are targeted to the user of whatever service he or she is receiving.
Yes.
I mean, and don't need to get into depth about it, but recordation tax could also be seen as a recordation fee, because it's not affecting the general public, it's affecting that individual that's buying the house. Is that correct? Or
I understand what you're saying, but I would argue it's a tax. They're not actually receiving a service for it. They're just, they have to pay because.
But it's
they're
that
in the
individual,
transaction.
it's not everybody.
Right, it's on the individual.
Yeah, okay.
But, I object when people say, don't tell me that's a fee, it's a tax.
Right.
But I think, to be fair, if it's a tax, then, and I think this is, then we shouldn't call it a fee.
Okay.
I mean, there is a legal distinction between fees and taxes. When people like to say, oh, it's all
Yeah.
the same, but it has to be related to a service, and it has to have a nexus to the cost of the service.
Right.
As Ted said, you can't have a fee that's $100 if it costs us only $10 to provide the service, for example.
Right.
Silly example.
No, I get it. And I mean, and that's why, especially last year, I was focused on recordation, because in my mind, I was looking at an individual as purchasing a house or something.
Yeah, agreed.
but-
And not every tax affects everybody the same way. If you don't own property, then property tax means nothing to you. If you don't buy a house, then recordation tax means nothing to you. But in both cases, we're not receiving the revenue because we're providing
Right.
something. Other than, we're providing all the general services we provide. There's not a direct,
Right.
you paid this and got
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Okay, that's fair.
So on that note of different fees, I know some point earlier, I think it was earlier, was it last year, we instituted the school impact fees for new houses. And I know we'd had a brief discussion about public safety impact fee, and obviously, the argument being that any fee collected has to go to some kind of, I guess, physical manifestation of what it is that we're seeking to provide. So if we're in the process of moving ahead with, sheriff's new building, state's attorney's new building, do those qualify as something for which an impact fee could be instituted? Because it is helping to provide and expand the scope of public safety for the county, and we do have new houses being built. We do have people moving into those new houses that are being built, and they are going to affect the provision of public safety services.
Possibly you could have, I think it's, even if it's possible, it's too late now. You would have to be collecting these in anticipation of doing something, not after the fact.
So
But
that
I'm
doesn't
not sure.
work? It wouldn't work because we haven't broken ground yet, have we?
Okay, but you don't have an impact fee. We would have to go through a process of even creating the
Okay.
impact fee. And the other thing is, basic idea of impact fees is to provide capacity, to provide the same level of service to a growing population. So the really easy one is schools. If you were providing schools and, you could accommodate so many kids in the schools and you get 1,000 more kids, impact fees could be used to make sure there are seats for that growing population. The reason we had the impact fee for schools set at 0 for a decade or so was because the population wasn't growing. So there wasn't any case to be made where we would spend that money. So we did put it back into place because enrollment is growing again. But the board set it at $3,000, I think, or something along those lines. that and the level of activity we have is not generating a whole lot of money. Really not enough to even influence how we, when I talk about those projects and what it's going to do to your dedicated local impacts, the impact fees aren't enough to even change that picture.
And so even if we had a public safety impact fee, that would not necessarily affect where we are with the new buildings, not least of which because those are already planned and not in anticipation of something that's coming.
To have a public safety impact fee, I think you would have to be looking to do something like build additional police stations, additional fire stations. So you would already have to have some in place. Say the population has grown, we need another one. Or you probably could tie it to the need for equipment, engines, tankers and things like that. But it couldn't be to replace what you have today. It'd have to be because the need has grown.
Well, I mean, could you make could the argument be made that the coming State's Attorney's Office and Sheriff's Building are just that? The need is the need for the new buildings. I mean, it's not, I'm sorry.
It's not just about need, it's about demonstrating a connection between a growing population and the need. And even if we could do that, we would only be able to do it in a very small way, because the need for this building is on the surfaces that have already been provided to 175,000 people. If we grow 1,000 people, what implication does that have for the State's Attorney Building? I think that would be a really hard argument to make. And this is a problem with impact fees. People will often look at it and say, why don't you use it for this? Or can't I make this
Right.
argument? But there's law that is very restrictive on how you can use impact fees. And with schools, this comes up regularly. Well, we need roofs, we need HVACs. Why wouldn't you keep charging the impact fee? Because we can't use it to renew existing facilities. That's not an appropriate use of impact fees.
On a large amount of the fees that I'm looking at within revenue, there's 0% change from fiscal year '24 to fiscal year '25.
What page are you on?
15, 16, 17.
Okay, for a lot of those revenues, it's important for you to understand how we approach this for projecting
Okay.
purposes.
Yeah,
There's more than 100 revenues.
yeah,
Most of them are not big enough to significantly impact the budget.
right.
And we don't spend a great deal of time trying to decide, should this be 25,100 or 25,800? So yes, many of those budgets will just be carrying the number forward. Now, if we find that, last 3 years, we've gotten 35,000, not 25,000, we'll react to that and build it in.
But you're right, a lot of them are small, but if we, and I don't want to salami slice decisions, but if we were to take a 1% increase over the next 3 pages, it's going to end up being a significant amount of dollars.
Or what would that look like? We're looking at a total in FY '24.
I don't know.
FY '23, the
I mean,
actual.
it's just another method to generate fees, huh?
Page 14 has the totals, so you don't have to, if
Yeah.
you're trying to get that number, it wouldn't be super hard.
Well,
And, there are things in the mix here that aren't all going to be together where you could take an approach like that. You think about the things that are called fees, we have permits and licenses.
Right.
There's a number of categories where you have discretion on some up to a point to raise them. And if I'm not suggesting that this is where you are, but if the commissioner said, we'd like to increase all the fees by 10%, we could look at that, tell you if there are some that we think you won't be able to do that, and then you could go from there.
On page 15, under other local taxes, admissions, what exactly is that? It's admissions.
Pretty much what it sounds like, a place like Stratosphere in Eldersburg or movie theaters, there's an admissions tax. I believe it's a state tax, but we can set the rate. I haven't looked at that for a long time, but.
Okay, I was just curious.
Admissions and amusement tax, and you set the rate up to a cap, and the state collects it, and then they send it.
And they give it
So-
back to us.
Right, so
Okay.
when you go, as Ted says, to a movie theater or whatever, you pay a tax, and then that gets to the state, and the state sends it back to us.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple items, if everybody will indulge me for a second. Can you confirm for me what we're giving the Arts Council in FY '25? Is it 45? I couldn't
I'll
remember.
find out.
It's about 43,000.
Okay, thank you.
How much?
43.
And where is that now? That's no longer under Rec and Parks, right?
It's in the recreation budget,
I'm sorry?
the recreation budget.
It's in,
Recreation.
yeah, it's in the recreation budget, which is under Recreation and Parks.
Okay, I thought we separated that a year ago, well, 6 months ago.
Yeah, that was the conversation.
Commissioner Guerin said the same thing earlier. I don't remember that, but are you suggesting that you would want a separate budget for Arts Council?
Well, where is it? Like, because I'm looking at the rec and culture summary.
You won't see it in the summary.
Okay.
I mean, if you go to the detail for their budget, you don't have it, but if you went to the detail, you'd see a line for it, but it doesn't rise to that level,
Got it.
which was kind of where I was. It's not its own budget, it's just an expenditure of the recreation budget.
So I'm going to make a motion that we remove Arts Council funding from our budget, so that's a reduction of $43,000. Allow Rec and Parks to keep that money and use it for actual Rec and Parks purposes. I have no idea why, we provide Arts Council with money. They have their own fundraisers, quite robust fundraisers. They charge admission for things. So we've got, in my mind, we've got a pretty black and white choice. We can let them keep that money or remove it from them and give it to the Rec and Parks Department and allow them to use it whatever purposes they see fit, because they have come to us for additional dollars. So that would be one way to use the money, but I'm pretty adamant in my conviction that they shouldn't be getting any money from the Carroll County government whatsoever. I don't understand why we're doing that. I mean, here we are, we're talking about ways to try to increase revenue
which, you know, I understand we're going to have that discussion. Sometimes it might be a fee discussion, it might be a tax discussion, but how do we have those discussions if we're doing things with money such as this? So the part about what we do with it is, I guess, another discussion entirely, but I'm going to recommend removing Arts Council funding from the Carroll County budget, making it 0, because I don't see how we can look people in the eye and tell them we're trying to make certain reductions and at the same time giving money away, or in Commissioner Gordon's comments earlier, giving people rent for free. So I've got a couple instances of this here, but I thought I would start with the Arts Council, so I'm going to make a motion to remove the $43,000 from our Carroll County budget.
Is that the only funding that they received from us, the 43,000, or was there something else too?
I think that was it.
Well, they were eligible for self-help money and had on occasion used it, but you all pulled them out of that earlier.
When, do we use the building and do we pay?
We use the building, we do not pay.
When the Chamber of Commerce uses it, for instance, the state of the county, do they pay? But we don't.
We don't.
Obviously, but we're there with the chamber.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? They've said before what they use that for, and I forget.
My discussion is, are we going to do the same for the Historical Society and Union Mills? And that's where you're going with this?
Yes, sir. To not the same degree, but those actually were my next two discussions I was gonna broach with the board.
So one thing I do remember, and Deb and I were just talking about, we've funded the Arts Council for many years, I don't know how long, but it was increased when they became a self-incorporated entity, because they could no longer be under our insurance. And so the funding did go up some, I don't remember how much, that year and subsequent years to help them pay for the insurance costs, the additional insurance costs that they incur as a result of not being under our umbrella.
Do they receive any funding from Westminster?
I believe Westminster owns that building.
That is correct. Westminster owns the building, and I do believe in past years, I can't remember currently, but I do know they've had some involvement with the building and other things within that property.
Do they lease it?
I believe it's $1 a year, if I remember correctly.
Are you sure? Okay. I was trying not to call attention to it.
No, just say it.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean,
Yes, it is, not to interrupt you, it is $1 a year. I'm looking at their website right now just to see the overview of the Arts Council. So just real quickly, the Arts Council was formed in, where was it, 1969, I think it said, or a little way after that. But then they did incorporate in the 80s. 69 is a group of volunteers. 1980s, they hired a professional director and gradually worked to play a larger role in the arts community.
And what was that, about $1? Did I hear that right?
Yes, it says that the building is now owned by the city of Westminster and leased to the Arts Council for $1 a year.
you know, the services that the nonprofits provide are so important to the county. And we give a lot overall, you know, to them. And I'm not belittling the Arts Center or the Historical Society or others. They have other methods of raising money, and it's a different level of service. So I can see doing this. I mean, it's not going to shut the doors on them. It's going to promote they're, you know, it's going to cause them to look at marketing a little bit differently, so.
Does it increase the quality of life in Carroll County? And compared to their whole budget of relatively little bit of money, do we want to kind of keep our foot in the door?
What, could you elaborate a little bit on that? When you say keep our foot in the door, what do you mean?
In other words, if we give them money, then we can talk to them and talk about issues and talk about stuff. It's, if we don't, they could nicely say, stay out of my building. And I just wonder, you know, it's, I'm not sure.
How much do we give them right now?
43,000.
Which, just for some level of information, the FY '22, FY '23 report they have on their site notes revenue of $1,083,325. It also does note, just to be completely transparent, expenses of $1,098,672, and then they do breakdowns as to assets, liabilities, and equity. But
Any more discussion?
What, okay, so when going off what you said, Commissioner Kyler, the relationship that we have with the Arts Center right now, beyond the funding and having the Chamber of Commerce host the State of the County and, what is why is my mind going blank? The group,
Leadership, Carol?
thank you, Leadership Carol, right? Beyond that, how much daily interaction do we have with them? How much do we partner with them on outside of giving them the $43,000?
We just recently did a letter to try to help them raise funds in other areas and other grants that they said was a big help. I guess we could have, whether we were connected to them or not. There's been things going on there, positive and negative, that I think, again, we kind of have a seat at the table and can talk to them about. But I don't know if that's worth money or not.
We have been holding our public hearings on the budget there, too.
And
That's the,
again,
that's the county's use, whereas the other is the chamber's use, just to.
Didn't we, wait, you said we were holding our public hearings on the budget at the Arts Center? Didn't we hold it at the college last year?
yes, last year was the
Yeah.
college, and but the prior year was, the year prior, though,
Yeah, might have been a
to
conflict.
Okay.
Ted's point, though, the previous year was at the Arts Council.
yeah.
And, you know, our Recreation and Parks Department has, you know, interaction with them. We have we attend their monthly or periodic board meetings and things like that. You know, over the years, there's been more or less, you know, interaction depending on what's going on.
Is it, I apologize.
I was going to say, they were instrumental in starting the barn quilt project. They worked with Recreation and Parks on the first 10 barn quilts, things like that. But it comes and goes, I'm sure, over the years, depending on what's going on.
And I'm just going to make a really general comment on nonprofits as a whole, not specifically the Arts Council or anybody else we're going to talk about today, and maybe somebody won't talk about. There's a fair amount of them we don't fund at all directly. There's countless nonprofits we don't fund. Now, there are some of those nonprofits that later receive money via the health department, other entities, but just want to put that out there as something to think about. I'm not saying that's pro or con any of these groups, but there are entities that do not come to us for annual funding of any type.
And I think, how many small nonprofits deal with citizen services? that,
Lots.
There's
I
a
mean,
lot
Yeah, if you
there.
talk about like their circle of caring,
Yes.
it's a fairly wide net.
Yeah.
And you have some very small nonprofits out there that have very,
and I also think we've learned there's some nonprofits we shouldn't fund.
yeah,
Just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean they're good.
right. Yeah,
But-
you only fund 10 of the, what I would say, those kinds of nonprofits. Arts councils, a little
There's also
unique.
nonprofits with the veterans community, there's nonprofits, I mean, you're right, there's lots of them. Every time you turn around and you want to support one. This one's just in a very interesting, we have a history of a relationship with them. They are in the county seat, we do have activities with them. It's not about the dollar amount because it's a drop in the bucket to a $1 million budget, It's more of a gesture to give them something. So maybe, giving them something, but not 40-some odd thousand, and just cut it. I mean, the gesture's still there.
No, you have a valid point, I do agree. I think the one thing, and like I said, I don't know if everybody's had the opportunity to look through that list, those 3 pages. I don't want to say it's a death by 1,000 cuts, but it kind of feels that way after a while. It's sort of like having the leaky faucet at home, and it seems like nothing, and then there's a huge bucket. So I'm not by any means suggesting, and I'm just kind of following under what Commissioner Guerin brought up, but, 45,000 here, 75,000 there, it's going to add up faster than we realize in some cases. I mean, we fortunately and unfortunately get to sit there on Thursday mornings and see massive amounts of money that go through, that is the taxpayers' funding, so, not to say that any amount is not significant, it's just a case of how does it add up is always sort of my question at the end of the day.
I think there's, just before we go too much farther, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect. I think the motion that's been made and seconded is just to remove the funding from the Arts Council, but not the second half but keep it in the Recreation and Parks. I believe that you were just removing it at this point, correct?
Removing the
The
line item,
43.
if you will. It's,
The $43,000 from the budget.
So I'm sorry, Commissioner Guerin, because I thought, I know you were talking about
yeah,
adding it to
yeah,
the,
yeah, you're right.
You did
So
say
the-
both things, but I think the
motion
motion
was
was
just for the-
just about the
yeah.
43,000 being removed. I just want to be,
You-
everybody to be clear. It's
You are correct. Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. So I
just restate it,
And I
maybe.
would, yeah, I'd like to restate the motion to withdraw the funding from the Arts Council in the amount of $43,000, but leave those funds in the recreation line item, if you will. And the reason being, I mean, I know these recreation councils are hurting pretty bad, and the amount of volunteers that keep the fields together and go out and do all the hard work, those numbers are dwindling. I hear from them, I hear from the Arts Council the Recreation Council folks all the time about how difficult things are. The cost for them to go out and, fertilize fields and do things like that is just going up and up and up as well. So, and again, let's not forget that, this particular, the total rec and parks budget, it's really about kids. I mean, it's all about kids. So why wouldn't we just make that more important than that funding for the Arts Council? I mean, you can look at it as a number of different ways.
so before, because I'm very willing to second the motion. Before we go further, do you want to recommend that 43,000 go to a specific part of the Rec and Park budget?
Well, that's a good question. I don't
Well-
know if we can do that or not, and how
We
we
were
would
just
do that.
talking about that. Okay, so if you just left it in Rec and Parks, it would just go towards their general operations, because we don't fund rec councils.
Exactly,
Um,
I know.
So if you wanted it to help rec councils, you could direct it to self-help.
The self-help, that would be even better. I don't know how everybody feels about that.
I like it.
That would be,
And it's
that would be
nothing,
really something
right.
if we could do that.
And it's, you know, and I'll be clear about it, my seconding of this, and I'm sure everybody agrees, is, you know, it's nothing to do with anything personal against the Arts Council, but with limited funding, you know, trying to do the most that we can with the limited resources that we have. So I will second that motion to take the $43,000 from the Art Council and put it into self-help in rec and parks.
You know, just to be clear, self-help is not actually in Rec and Parks, it's a capital project. But,
Do I need to, okay, so how do we amend the motion then to reflect that, or does it not matter?
I think you just, if you just end at, move to self-help,
Okay.
we're good.
I will amend that, well, you're the motion maker, so you,
We're
What
with
Commissioner
you.
Bigliotti said, can I just say that?
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
And
Again, remember, this isn't really all that formal, it's just so
I
we
know.
can keep track.
I know, but it's,
Well, yeah, we're trying to do that for your sake.
we're trying to, one less thing we have to spend time on.
And you don't want to put a few dollars into the Arts Center?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't know, what, you think it would make a difference at this point? I've probably already,
I mean,
cat's out of the
it's-
bag.
No, I mean, because it's going to go across the board. And
Yeah,
like, you know, you want to have that relationship. It's going to be no net change on this, but if we put, you know, 10,000 to the Arts Council, at least we're showing good faith that we want to still be there with them.
That's for the three of you to maybe discuss. I think
that's, I think Commissioner Bigliotti, I would be willing to compromise, but,
Yeah.
does anybody, if the three of you seem to think,
Thoughts?
I have mixed emotions on this from a couple directions, but I do agree with you, Commissioner Rothstein. I would like to keep at least a seat at the table in some fashion. I mean, it's
think
a pretty dramatic effect. I mean, granted, we are facing dramatic and serious budgetary issues, but I think it's a very dramatic effect to go from 43 to 0. I don't know how their budget is set up and structured. I know some of these nonprofits have the belief, I guess is the word I'll use, that they're going to get that funding each year, which I would be less than wanting to operate in that fashion, but some do, and that's not a criticism, it's just an observation I've had in the past. I would be supportive of giving them at least a 10, because I think we need to at least give them something. I don't want to totally lock anybody and kind of take them out at the kneecaps in the midst of a budget. It's not really where I want to be. If we can do that, I think, you know, maybe it should be more than 10, I don't know, but you kind of threw that number out, so I'm kind of sticking to that right now. I do think, though, like I said a few minutes ago, I do think we have to really take a look, because, and I hate to keep going back to this analogy, but it's drops of water in a bucket, and the bucket just keeps getting fuller and fuller, and how do we reconfigure that funding? Because I think we're all going to be very surprised in some cases if we move enough numbers around what we might find. And it may shock us, and not completely in a good way. But I would definitely support the 10.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll amend my motion to remove the $33,000 from funding for the Arts Council and redirect it to self-help.
Second.
Thanks.
I'm okay. I think some of these people, we're gonna hear back from.
Oh, yeah. Oh, without
And,
question.
you know, to me, they look at this, it's, we don't put restrictions on it, and a lot of their stuff's grant money.
Yep.
Back to rec councils, they have a lot of adults, they're not just about kids. And this place has a lot of kids. You know, this used to be a rec council, until it became incorporated, and now I don't know what's gonna happen now that they all have to be nonprofits but not incorporated, so I guess they're still rec councils. But a lot of things are changing with it, but it's a good compromise. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I also wanted to bring up the topic of the Carroll County Historical Society, we have $60,000 earmarked for them for FY '25. We also allow them the use of several, I think several buildings, or is it, Commissioner Gordon, you're kind of the expert on the Historical Society. Maybe there are several buildings that we let them use, as we should, but we don't charge them. Isn't that
Well,
correct?
The buildings, actually, if they're the ones I think you're speaking of, they own the buildings on Main Street. Previously, currently, they have a contract with the city, with Emerald Hill, which is old City Hall. I'm guessing the building you're talking about
That's
is...
expired and they're out of it.
Yes.
Just so you, yeah,
Okay, and I knew that was in process, okay.
right.
I'm assuming the building you're talking about is they have warehouse space over outside of Greenmount. I
At the
think
North
that's-
Carroll Senior Center.
Yes, I think that's
probably.
what you're speaking of.
Didn't we purchase them a plotter a couple years ago?
Yeah, some piece of equipment, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. They wanted like a big printer to call plotters. I just remember doing that. We seem to be at their, I don't want to say beck and call, but we're very supportive of the Historical Society and all that they're doing. But I think in the same breath as other conversations, if we're giving them X amount, we cut it, to 10 or 15,000 to stay a part of it because, you participated in it. Aren't you on the board as well?
Yes, as the ex officio.
As the ex officio, and we want to maintain that relationship.
So what's the proposal?
My intention was to motion for a $20,000 reduction in their funding for FY
Which is
'25.
what we did last year, too.
Which is, oh, we did?
Yeah, we took it from 80 to 60.
Okay.
Oh.
I mean, again, another figure was just mentioned, and that we can have that discussion as well, but I was going to motion that it should be reduced by $20,000 to $40,000 for FY '25.
Just out of curiosity, while we're discussing this, what is the cost, I don't know, maybe Ted or somebody can help us, what's the cost associated to the warehouse space they have?
I imagine we could assume some market value and multiply it by the space they have, but
Sure.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
It was dead space nobody wanted. I argued, I don't know why the rec council didn't get it, but I assume the current commissioners at that time wanted this to happen. I don't know why. Maybe they thought it was a more passive use. Who knows?
You know, the thing when that happened, it was, the Historical Society needed space to store stuff.
Yep.
Commissioners at the time said, okay, we have some space, and I don't think it was much more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering, and I'm just throwing out a number that's kind of a round number, but I don't know, I mean, is that warehouse space technically $10,000, let's say?
I mean,
I don't know.
it was space the county chose not to use when they designed the senior center.
What we have
It
in the
was
building.
just dead space.
I believe, and I'm looking for it, that the Department of Public Works put together a rough estimate of the cost based on the square footage that they use and the amount we pay for the space. If I find it, I'll let you know, but I'm looking.
What's Historical Society's total budget?
If I had to guess off the top of my head,
$410,000.
How much?
$410,000
that's
is
about
what
what I was gonna guess, yeah.
Commissioner Gordon was going to guess.
You got it. You were off, I was off by 10.
Commissioner Garin, you're going late on him.
I don't have a second, so.
What, oh, second,
Oh, you
sorry.
did? Okay.
I'm just saying you're going light on them.
Oh, that, again, willing to discuss. Yeah, that's,
You know, their budget, operational budget is much less than the Arts Center. It's, you know, half the size. So they are needing our support more because of that. I think we should address the Arts Center to ensure that we do have a seat at the table as an ex officio, whether we take it on or not. But, you know, all of these positions. Yeah, I mean, I can, 40,000, I mean,
So we're looking, your motion, not your motion, you were looking at a $20,000 deduction,
Mhm.
correct?
yes. And again, for people who are listening or watching, if you're still out there, I mean, these are recurring costs. So that's what this is really all about for me. And no one's going to accuse me of playing favorites during this budget session, because I think just everything's on the table. And I think I'm holding true to that principle here. I know nobody wants to get anything cut.
I guess my only question, and I'm not playing favorites, I can separate myself from any organization, and I've done that before. We're looking at an entity that had almost 1.1 million in revenue, which was the Arts Council, getting 45. You have a much smaller entity economically that comes in at 410, that was receiving 60. Just trying to see where that number in my head kind of balances out in comparison.
Oh, you're trying to see if it's sort of...
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of see if there's a balanced formula in some aspect. I probably need Ted to do this because he's far better with numbers than I am.
I would actually argue against that approach because we don't, it's not like we have some formula for all these
Oh, I know.
nonprofits.
I know.
And do we want to establish that
No,
that is?
because
our
that
figure?
creates other things, I know. No, I know. I'm just thinking, and it really doesn't matter to me what group it is. You're talking about a group that operationally, that 60 is going to have a much bigger effect potentially than it will on the other, which was over $1 million. That's my concern, just being very factual on the numbers.
And we cut it last year.
Yes, that's a good point. I mean, I don't know, I don't like to split the difference, and I seem to keep bringing this up today. Commissioner Guerin, let me throw this one at you. What if you, and nobody's going to like me for this, but instead of the 60, what if you bumped it to, say, 50 or 55, given that they're receiving the warehouse space, sort of in lieu of that additional cash?
Sure, I'll amend my motion to reduce their funding to $50,000.
I'll second.
really. I went the opposite way.
It did. And again, I think, well, I think for me, one of the issues, again, we have to remember for the Arts Council money, we're taking that and we're putting into self-help funds. For this, we're just taking it.
But we're giving them a facility.
Correct.
I thought we were going the opposite because
Yeah.
you said we're giving them a building.
Well, my thought with that space we're giving them is, if they were paying it, let's say they're paying us the 10 and they're getting 60, it's still a negative 10. That was my thought process.
So we found the numbers, just
Okay.
in case
Sure.
anybody
What do you
cares. So Deb did the math, and it's about 16,000, a little over $16,000 a year in value, based on what
Okay.
we pay and the amount of space that they use 2,000 square feet.
Any more discussion?
I don't know if I had a did I have a second?
I did.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Vigliotti had a second. I mean, again, yeah. It
Any more-
sounds like there might be some discussion. I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah. Any more discussion?
Now,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
who said no?
Yeah, I said no. I mean, we're nickel diming these quality of life things in Carroll County. I don't understand it. but I don't understand a lot of things. And the Arts Council, again, like your point, they're pretty big. And it was a hangover from when they were a rec council. They're not anymore. They chose to incorporate, so I was looser about that. But some of these groups that haven't really changed,
I understand.
yeah,
I know what you mean.
no, it passed.
I do have another issue to bring up. This is really not as much about money as it is about me, is about principle for me. And I think we've had some pretty strong differences of opinion when it comes to Union Mills. We give them $20,000 a year. So over the lifetime of this projected budget, that's $100,000. I understand it's an important heritage site, if you will, within the county, but it does belong to us. We do perform most, if not all, the maintenance there. We just replaced, I think, a parking lot not long ago. The board voted, not unanimously, to help pay for a stone or something of the sort at the tune of $230,000. So I don't know why we're giving Union Mills the Union Mills Historical Society any money at all. Not that I have anything against them, but they seem to be doing fairly well. We don't ask them for anything in return, as far as I know. So, I mean, if somebody can make a good argument as to why we're providing them with taxpayer funds, I'm willing to listen, but I don't know why we're doing it.
Again, I'll say quality of life in Carroll County, and the Shrivers have been, and yes, it's our property, they gave it to us, but it's, I just think it's a good thing, quality of life, and I think, I got a feeling if we said we wanted to have a picnic there next weekend, they'd say fine. But, and our Public Works people do work with them a lot, and we do have the director going to their meetings.
Yeah, this one I kind of look at almost as like it's the second, to my understanding, it's the second most visited tourist attraction in the county, to my understanding. I may be wrong. And, you know, I think, I understand Commissioner Kyler's concerns about nickel and diming and everything, but I also take the point, and why I've supported the cuts to the Arts Council and Historical Society, is that we're, you know, looking at budgetary constraints. With Union Mills, again, I look at that more akin to something like the Farm Museum than I do to an independent entity that's soliciting help from us in some way. You know, I look at it more akin to the Farm Museum than to an independent agency. I guess if that helps explain my thoughts about it.
No, I understand that, but I guess what to me differentiates it between the Farm Museum is that we don't make any revenue at all off of Union Mills, if I'm not mistaken, right? I mean, we don't even get rent. But I haven't made a motion. I wanted to bring it up because this board has spent a lot of time talking about Union Mills. We just renewed their lease for, I can't remember how many years. 25. 25? Okay, 25 years. So we've been quite generous.
Right.
As we are to most entities like that, so, okay. Doesn't seem to be,
Well, I'll just make one quick comment, and, you know, Commissioner Vigliotti did mention the Farm Museum, and there's similarities and differences between Union Mills and the Farm Museum. I think, yes, the Farm Museum does bring in some revenue on some level, whereas, as Commissioner Guerin pointed out, we don't receive anything on the Union Mills front. I think the other thing, though, is when we're looking at the cost basis of maintaining property, I know I've looked a little bit into the two of them, but just at times comparing, and I know that we're spending at least like $25,000 a year, if I remember correctly, off of last year's numbers to mow the grass at Union Mills, whereas, and that's coming out of our county department, whereas with the Farm Museum, that's coming out of their part of their budget. So, I mean, it's a significant amount of money that the Farm Museum is getting specifically hit with, for lack of a nicer word, versus if it was coming out of, the same department. So they are seeing that, whatever that number is, I can't remember for the Farm Museum, but it is a substantial cost that they're incurring. So that is affecting their bottom line at the end of the year.
I want to be clear on this.
Sure.
The Farm Museum funds for maintenance is county dollars.
I agree.
The funds for Union Mills maintenance is county dollars. So what's you're saying one's different than the
I
other?
guess to me, we're outsourcing the Farm Museum to commercial grass cutting and that kind of thing, from what I understand, versus we have our own department doing it. So there is a cost difference based off of what we're being charged. I mean, I realize it
Yeah,
all
I
comes out of the
understand.
same
I just-
pot at the end of the
yeah.
day. No, I get that.
Exactly, and that's what I was saying, it's coming out of the same
I
pot.
know.
I think, I'm not in favor of taking funds away from this. I am definitely in favor of building a stronger relationship, and we're moving in that direction. But it still has to be stronger. Mr. Boki attending, us getting more engaged. Like you said, if we want to have events there, we can. Maybe we should, have an off-site there, The next holiday activity could be there, something where they'll be welcoming for that inside their barn. But I think we need to build a relationship. I've seen them been built over years, but we're still not there. But it is one of a kind in the community, in the county, and they have really cool events. I don't know if they'd be able to do all the events they do if we were not able to subsidize some of it. So I just don't know. But I also understand we don't get revenue from it, Maybe we could look at that too. Getting signage, putting more, more things out there, so when they do have their flower show or their beer show or their corn show, having booths out there, something, for tourism and for other activities. Just thinking other ways of building that relationship that we don't have yet. So that's kind of my 2 cents. So yeah, I'm not in favor of this one, but we'll see where it goes.
Well, I'm not prepared to make a motion then, but to your point, Commissioner Rothstein, I hope that they do decide that, given this discussion, if they're paying attention, it'd be nice to hear
Yeah.
from them
Yeah, that they are listening.
in this
That's
regard,
right.
in that they're listening,
That's right. I agree.
because this is all county funded,
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
And understand that, but again, by our choice, Brian Boki he's at every meeting, and he's now doing emails telling us what they say. The communication has been all we've asked for.
Yeah.
Now, I've talked to some of them, and they've always answered anything I said, but yeah.
Yeah, no, but I agree.
Yeah,
They
but
should be
yeah,
listening and-
it's,
yeah,
all of these groups, it should be two-way conversations.
yep.
But like I say, I think they've been one of the longest with us having a rep on their board.
And it did seem like early on that I don't know how long we've been attending those meetings, but either we weren't at every meeting, or we weren't getting all the feedback from it. I agree with you, it does seem like we're getting more
Yep.
out of that now. Again, you're right, you're correct. I just, if I'm an entity in the county and I'm getting taxpayer dollars,
Yep.
I'm sending a thank you card.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes they forget to do that, and it goes back, honestly, we had the conversation about the library. It goes back to the library. Sometimes just saying thank you goes a long ways, and they understand where their bread is buttered. And I'm not, singling them out, but it goes with all of them. Every one of these, we should be getting hey, thank you for continued support for our community. So, but I do think Union Mills, we can do better. And I'm expecting they're listening.
I do appreciate and respect the discussion, though.
Oh,
from-
yeah.
From everybody about
Absolutely.
everything.
This
You
is
know,
all
we,
good.
Thank you.
we did say, some months ago that, everything was going to be on the table to talk about. And even if it was, as Commissioner Rothstein said very well, to take it off the table.
Correct.
Have we had conversation about CC Visa and funds? Are there funds that we provide that we should be looking at, or no? I don't know.
They requested extra from us this year.
Yeah, which I think should be off the table. And I'm pretty blunt in saying that, but out of all the agency discussions, and we're going to go through the agency discussions because of the respect we owe them, the one that struck me the hardest was CC Visa's presentation for $300,000, but it was for their budget increase. And there was no real ties to those dollars, unless I'm mistaken, which is often, but I just couldn't get from here to there with their presentation.
So essentially, they're going down as EMS goes up, not equally, but they,
I know I threw a
how
grenade
much,
out there.
how much are they this year?
It's in one of the agency briefings.
How much what? Are they asking for an addition?
Those
Is that
three-
what your question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, how much in the budget right now is for them?
Oh,
4.7 million.
Okay.
Okay, when
And
you asked
and they've
about-
dropped from maybe 7 before EMS started? They're not half, but they're dropping.
Probably right. So there's a few things going on. Now, as we staff EMS, our funding to them for EMS is going down. We are also taking other costs that aren't directly about EMS. There are things that we're purchasing or paying for now for all the companies that they used to pay for individually.
Where do they show? Like if we're paying insurance that we didn't before, we used to give it here, now we're paying it, is that in EMS's budget? Or is that,
Some of it, I think, will be in the fire and EMS administrative budget, and some of it will be in EMS, and some of it will be in
will still be
fire.
here?
It depends on the cost. And the money that's remaining, or will be remaining after the EMS transition is done, will be focused on fire and rescue.
The two briefings, one was $100,000 for budget increase due to costs and unchanged basis for 20-plus years. And then the second is $200,000 for memorandum of understanding budget, is what they presented to us.
And that was shorthand for them. They want us to participate in maintaining their buildings, basically.
And
Talking about roofs and HVACs and things like that.
it would be really helpful to know what each one of those companies has in reserve. And to understand the total budget that we're working with. So my recommendation is we don't act on these until we receive those stations, 14 stations, and what they have in reserve. And then we can understand the total budget for CC Visa.
Okay, and I've met with representatives of Visa at least twice to talk about some of these things. And two separate items, although they potentially overlap, on how much money they have in reserves. I have suggested to them that it would be in their best interest to share with you how much they have, why they have what they have, what their plans are for using that money, or why they're accumulating it. I think it's a stronger position to be able to say, yes, we have $1 million, here's why, than to just leave questions on the table. Now, as far as the MOU and helping to pay for their buildings, they are interpreting the MOU as saying, we've committed to doing that. I don't agree. And my position with them has been, I don't think the commissioners have committed to doing that. And what I've said to them, and will now say to you, I think you should consider very carefully if you want to be involved in maintaining their buildings at all. If a roof needs to be replaced, us having put an EMS provider in that building didn't cause that roof to need to be replaced. So I don't think it's an easy argument that that is ours. But if you want to think about that, if you want to look at the possibility of participating, what I told them was, I believe you should inventory 14 companies.
Right.
What is it you have that you think that you would like the commissioners to participate in? Give us a plan for how you would like the commissioners to participate, and then we can talk about that. That didn't happen, and like you said, what it became was $200,000 for doing these things. And they did say in there somewhere that they would not expect the county to fund more than 50% of any one project, but that's as far as it went. So for me, there's two big things. Do you want to be involved at all? If you do, let's figure out a plan and a process, not just, what I don't want to have happen is Hampstead Roof coming to you and you saying yes or no, and then Mount Airy HVAC coming to you and say yes or no. I think there needs to be a more coherent approach to it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think if organization like this wants our support, they have to have the willingness to basically open up the kimono and show us what's inside, saying here are the 14 agencies or 14 stations, and this is how this will dovetail with that, with what they already have. And then we can make an educated decision. Right now, we're blind, saying, oh, just give me. I'm not dissing them, I'm not challenging what their, their abilities, but it's an uneducated and uninformed, and we should not make decisions that way.
And just so it's clear, my kimono is staying closed.
I appreciate that, so.
I'm not even sure that most of the individual fire companies want that. Now, we just went through a thing with the MOU, and I don't know if you found anything out about it, but that was a specific kind of equipment that they thought the MOU said they'd be reimbursed. And if it does, then they should be. If it doesn't, then they shouldn't be. And to me, that's consistency as you follow the written agreement. And I'd be curious, because I have the MOU highlighted by what they think it says, but I don't even know if that's the same one signed. And then the other thing I've seen, some of them are very open about their money, and some of them aren't. And then we've had some situations now where ESAC wants to tell them how they can spend their money. Well, I'd say, if you want to start maintaining my building, you can tell me how to spend my money. If you don't want to, then stay the hell out of it. So it gets, this whole hybrid system gets cloudy. It really does. And we, like you're saying, we need to be cautious. And, yeah, I don't think we want to maintain buildings. Now, if a county vehicle backs into a door, we probably not got to pay to fix it. But you're right, the roof didn't age because of that one piece of equipment. So it's strange. And I thought, like you're saying about the individual companies, I thought their request could have been a little more specific on
Oh,
what they really
absolutely.
wanted. I kind of wrote it off.
Right, and they started the conversation. At one point in the conversation, they did mention reserve, But then that conversation relatively quickly
Yep.
shut down. And I'm like, well, you started the conversation, now finish it. And show us what each station has, put it out there for us to allow us to make a better decision.
And,
So-
and I've heard about this for, I don't know, 20 years. And I don't know, you talk to a lot of the volunteers. I think they all know exactly what each other has. They just don't want to tell us. And that's been going on for, like I say, over 20 years.
Right.
You know, and it's this whole hybrid thing, it's tough, you know, it's, you donate and you do stuff and you get a ride in an ambulance and you get a bill and you're like, wait a minute, you know, but it's a tough situation. And then in turn you say, well, why are they having bingo? You know, if I'm getting a bill, why they have bingo? Well, it's a lot of things they gotta pay for, but we need to keep that separate as much as we can, or we're gonna,
Yeah, and on their fundraising, I have been trying to be conscious when I have the opportunity to talk to people, to remind them that what we're doing is not relieving them of all the pressures that they have on providing services
No.
and finding the money to do it. We have not taken away the need for their fundraising.
yep, no. And in the near future, that's not happening. So, did you want to say anything else about them?
No, well, no, I just, before making that decision, that, I would expect somebody's listening out there, or we make a request to
Yeah.
them, that they provide us the additional information if they want us to consider that $300,000.
So you're okay with their budget as it's established but
I haven't really looked.
aren't
I'm
ready
look-
to act on extra?
I'm looking at the agency extra. I didn't look really at
Yeah.
the depth of the budget.
They have a 3% increase is what's built into the recommended budget. Although, if you just look at the number, it's not a 3% increase, but that's because there was some one-time money in '24. But underlying funding is going up 3%.
Wait, for which again?
Visa.
Okay, yeah.
Is that 5,021,000? Is that what that is?
25, it's 4.7 million for Visa.
4.74, right? Is that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. But it says it's going down 5%.
Yeah, and that's why I said there was some one-time money
Okay.
in '24.
Okay,
So just dollar to dollar, it's going down.
Got it.
But underlying expenditures are being increased 3%.
There's also the EVOD reduction, so we gave them money for the emergency vehicle operator drivers, and that is now coming out as we add the FADO positions in the coming transition.
Great, thank you.
say that last part again? That money's not coming out, or?
It is.
It is coming out as part of the transition.
Okay. Thanks.
So to clarify on that number, my understanding was always that when stations were, quote unquote, staffed by the county, that would be reducing, that number goes down because we're not providing the money anymore for the paid individuals in the fire stations. So you'd always have just volunteers and county employees. You'd never have county employees, volunteers, and the paid staff at the same time. So that's why that number is going down, right?
Yes.
I mean, for the most part, okay. I'm not gonna sound like a broken record. I'm very hesitant to get into a conversation with the different corporations and the stations about how much reserves they have, because again, I'm very sensitive, and I think we all need to be very sensitive to the fact that these are volunteers. We don't own a darn thing in their stations. So if we ask them to start, if we expect them to start opening their books, I think we better make sure, they understand why. Because I think that is a very precarious situation for us to put ourselves in. I understand the visa request for the building request, the 200,000. Case in point, a station down in my district, the president, they did some remodeling for our staff to go in there. And because this is an early process, and I totally understand that, it's, he may have been under the impression that you'd be reimbursed for that. So again, I know that the staff's spent a considerable amount of time trying to get that situation right, or at least explain the county's view. However, I think that being able to provide a certain amount of money for the 14 stations to come in and say, hey, I did this for your employees, I'd like a 50%, 50% of that cost reimbursed, makes sense. I think the really hard part, though, is what's already been mentioned. How in the world do you figure out who gets what? So I think that, for me, is the biggest issue. I guess, the analogy is, if there were 14 police stations all over the county, and they were being staffed by quote-unquote volunteers for the last generations, and we were trying to put some police into those police stations, will we be asking them to make sure, hey, listen, we think you guys have some money? I don't think that's the case, what's being asked here, but I think we would probably look at that as going, well, okay, we understand you've made some renovations to your stations. Maybe we should look at mechanisms for you to at least come in and request the reimbursement, even if we don't make you any promises that we're going to do that. Fire and EMS and police, again, that's public safety. I don't think there's anything more important. For me personally, I don't think there's anything more important. I think I probably speak for most, if not all, of the board. So if we can find a way to help CC Visa out, I think we should. I understand, though, that given our situation, that may not be something we can decide upon now. The additional operating, that was definitely a lot more fuzzier for me and during that discussion. But I do feel like I've got a pretty good understanding of why they came in for the 200K building requests. And I just wanted to make sure that, I don't know if the other board members were sort of cognizant of that example of that one station, but that's why they're asking for that money.
Now, there might be something that I've missed, but that situation is the only thing I'm aware of where a company is making an argument, we made changes specifically to accommodate you. And even there, I think there's some question of, did we ask them to do that or not? I think the basic push for this money is renewal of their infrastructure, not reacting to things we wanted them to change.
Well, so first of all, thank you for that. I didn't know that might be the only case out of all 14 stations, so that's good to know. That leads to the questions I don't think the five of us have here. What exactly was that money? Because that's what I thought they meant, is that this would be a fund that they could draw from if they could convince us that they did some changes for staff. But you're saying that's not what.
The focus here is roofs and
simply
HVACs and
infrastructure.
things like that, yes.
Okay.
And they all have MOUs, right?
It's all the same MOU.
Yeah, so they need to honor what's in that, or negotiate to change it. And if that
The problem is
says,
there's still some
oh, I know,
disagreement over interpretation.
yes.
I understand where you're coming from. How we should make the ask where, we're not being too intrusive. But making the ask to allow us to make the informed decision on how to provide the funds or allocate the funds is necessary. And also, the fire stations, I thought their reserves, they have the ability to share or provide some reserves from one to another. Isn't that correct or no? From one station to another in reserves?
I don't know.
It's their money.
We wouldn't be
Right.
involved.
I thought for some reason, I thought they did. Maybe I'm completely misspeaking, but I was under the impression that they had that ability. And it's, again, I'm not against providing the right amount of funds. I just want to provide the right amount of funds, you know, as educated as I can. And that's, you know, understanding, okay, where's all the money? You know, show me the money, and then I can say,
And
This
if-
makes
And
sense.
if we approve this, who decides whether the money's right or wrong?
yeah,
You know, and one more thought on what Commissioner Guerin was saying. You know, if there was a situation where we're saying to a company, we want you to make these changes to your building for our needs, I would absolutely be sitting here saying, if that's what we want, we should be paying for it. So on the one thing I know about, the problem here is, did we actually request them to do that or not?
Well, gentlemen, did anybody have anything else for today? Well, if nobody has anything, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Before we vote, do any of you have anything you want to tell us today before we leave? That you can say in public?
I don't think so. We're back Thursday, what time?
afternoon.
1 o'clock, I think.
Afternoon.
Thursday 1.
So that's a question. I'm glad you said that. So Thursday, we show 1 o'clock for 3 hours, which would be until 4. I'm fine with that. It can be till 6. But if we're going to adjourn now, I've been invited to be at a Boys and Girls Club at 3:30. I don't want to tell them no and then leave here Thursday at 3. But,
That's the Boys and Girls Club is Thursday.
what's that?
The Boys and Girls Club is Thursday?
Yeah, they're judging something or something, I forget what.
I thought it was like an open house, because I.
No, that's a different time.
Oh, is it?
That's Tuesday.
That's a different time, and I'm going to
Oh.
that.
Yeah,
That's Tuesday, I believe, isn't it?
yeah, because that's on my calendar.
Yeah, that's the opening in Hampstead,
The open house is
1 PM.
On Tuesday
Next
the 9th,
Tuesday.
correct?
Yep, correct.
next Tuesday at 1.
And it is
And-
okay to leave your stuff here if you want.
But like I'm saying, on Thursday, it's just, what time are we meeting Thursday?
You talking about the open?
This Thursday.
Well, open session is normal time. I was under the impression we would be convening in budget at 1 o'clock, was the last thing that I had seen on the.
That's the schedule at the moment, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Does that work for you? Do you want to move it up?
No,
Oh.
I don't care. We have a 9 AM open session. And then that shows at 1 PM, and then there's something like at 4 PM for 1 hour, or it's weird how it shows it.
Yeah, it's on there twice for some reason, I don't
And-
know why.
I don't care, but what time, we're gonna start at 1, and when are we gonna end?
Well, if you have something
Up
at
to you.
2?
It's up to you.
Oh,
Yeah, but,
well, Commissioner, if you have something at 3:30, we can end at 3, no
no,
problem.
I don't care. I can say no to them. I can say yes to them, but I'm just asking what our schedule is, and we should make sure, we all got a lot going on, and I just want to make sure our schedules say the correct times.
We'll be good 1 to 3.
Okay.
And then Tuesday is all day, like today, which is a 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and we should be fine.
Yeah, that works.
I mean, we're,
Well, Tuesday, the 9th,
Yeah,
it says 1 hour and then 7
oh,
hours.
shoot,
But there's a Boys and Girls
Yeah,
Club
I got that.
ribbon cutting at 1 PM
Yeah.
yeah.
that I know I'm
Got it.
going to.
We
Yeah.
had discussed
So-
Tuesday that.
Tu-
we-
Tuesday,
That
right.
can
It would
be,
be,
Yeah.
but you know how that's gonna be. That's an hour, it's gonna be 2 hours till we go and
Yeah.
come back. But if, I just wanna let everybody know, because
Right.
maybe the three of you would love meeting with both of us gone.
No,
Well, you don't know, do you?
no, you want all of us here as much
No,
as
no,
possible.
I agree. I was being facetious.
So-
I'm sorry.
Um,
Military people don't have a sense of humor.
yeah, I do. No, shut up.
Man. But
All right, so 1 to 3 on Thursday, and then on
So that's
Thursday.
for good,
Right,
okay.
and then on Thursday, we'll double check Tuesday.
on Tuesday, okay.
So Thursday, we'll talk about Tuesday.
okay. And it sounds like some of you have places to be on that Tuesday,
Yes.
Yeah.
which I totally understand.
Right.
It's more important than, it's important to get out.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, we got a lot of important stuff to talk about, but I know with sports practices, sometimes when you exceed the attention span, you're not being productive. Okay, does that mean we're ready to vote?
Yes, sir.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Ted, did you